I was arranging the final details for our 10th wedding anniversary celebration when my brother Daniel called with news that would have shattered most wives into complete despair. But while my husband Trevor was probably congratulating himself on his perfectly timed betrayal, I was already calculating how to protect the life and business empire I'd spent a decade building from absolutely nothing. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. Before we dive into this incredible journey of betrayal and ultimate triumph, let me know in the comments what city you're watching from, and if you've ever had someone close to you try to warn you about a devastating truth. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's story about a teacher who discovered her principal's shocking secret will absolutely blow your mind. The phone call that changed everything came on a Thursday afternoon in October, while I was putting the finishing touches on what I thought would be the most memorable anniversary weekend of our marriage. I was in my home office in our beautiful colonial house in Maplewood Heights, surrounded by fabric samples and catering menus for the surprise party I'd been planning for months. Trevor and I had built what everyone considered the perfect life together: a thriving interior design business, a stunning home, and what appeared to be an unshakable partnership that had weathered every storm for 10 incredible years. If you like the story of our channel, please like the channel, and if you are interested in these stories, join our channel membership. Thank you. My name is Catherine Walsh, and at 35, I had transformed a small freelance design hobby into Harmony Interiors, the most sought-after residential design firm in the tri-state area. What started as a side project while Trevor established his financial consulting practice had evolved into $1 million business that employed 12 talented designers and had a waiting list of clients that stretched 6 months into the future. We owned our dream home in Maplewood Heights' most prestigious neighborhood, had built impressive investment portfolios, and were planning to start a family after this milestone anniversary celebration. But Daniel's voice carried an urgency that immediately made my stomach drop. My older brother had always been protective, sometimes overly so, but there was something different in his tone that afternoon, a combination of anger and genuine fear that I'd never heard before. "Catherine, I need you to sit down," Daniel said, without his usual cheerful greeting. "I'm at the Metropolitan Golf Club, and I just overheard something that's going to be really hard to hear, but you need to know immediately." The Metropolitan Golf Club was Trevor's favorite networking spot, where he spent most Wednesday evenings supposedly building client relationships and playing in the weekly business league. I'd always encouraged these outings, believing they were crucial for his consulting firm's growth and gave him the social connections he needed to thrive professionally. "What's wrong?" I asked, though something deep in my intuition was already preparing for devastating news. Daniel wasn't the type to create drama or jump to conclusions. If he was calling with this level of urgency, whatever he'd discovered was serious. "Catherine, Trevor is here with 2 other men, and they're not talking about golf or business," Daniel continued, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "They're discussing divorce proceedings, asset division, and timeline strategies. One of them is definitely a lawyer, and they're talking about you like you're some kind of obstacle to be managed, rather than Trevor's wife of 10 years. The words hit me like a physical blow. Divorce proceedings, asset division, timeline strategies. While I'd been selecting flowers and planning surprise anniversary toasts, my husband had been strategically planning the destruction of our marriage with professional legal assistance. Are you absolutely certain it's Trevor? I asked, though I already knew Daniel wouldn't make this kind of mistake. He'd met Trevor countless times at family gatherings, holiday celebrations, and the numerous dinner parties we'd hosted in our home. Catherine, I'm looking directly at him, Daniel replied grimly. He's wearing that blue striped shirt you bought him last month, and he's sitting at the corner table near the fireplace. They've been talking for over an hour, and from what I can hear, this isn't a casual consultation. This is detailed planning for something that's supposed to happen very soon. My mind began racing with a mixture of shock, betrayal, and something else entirely, a cold, analytical fury that surprised me with its intensity. The same strategic thinking that had built Harmony Interiors from nothing into a thriving enterprise was already beginning to process this information and formulate responses. Daniel, I need you to stay there and listen to everything you can. Without being obvious, I said, my voice becoming steadier as my business instincts took over. Don't approach them. Don't let Trevor see you. But try to gather as much information as possible about their timeline and strategy. Already on it, Daniel confirmed, and I could hear the protective determination in his voice. Catherine, there's something else. They keep mentioning your business specifically, and it doesn't sound like Trevor is trying to protect your interests. It sounds like he's planning to claim a significant portion of Harmony Interiors as marital property. Harmony Interiors, the business I'd built through 15-hour days, countless client consultations, and the careful cultivation of relationships with contractors, suppliers, and high-end residential clients throughout Westchester County. The company that had been featured in Metropolitan Home magazine twice in the past year. The enterprise that had actually been generating more revenue than Trevor's consulting firm for the past 3 years, though he'd never acknowledged that reality in our personal conversations. As I sat in my home office, surrounded by the evidence of my professional success, design awards, client testimonial letters, and photographs of beautiful homes I'd transformed, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The woman Trevor was apparently planning to surprise and overwhelm with divorce papers was not the same person who had built a design empire through pure determination and strategic thinking. What Trevor didn't realize, as he sat in that golf club planning what he probably considered his masterful strategic surprise, was that the same person who had navigated complex client negotiations, managed intricate project timelines, and built lasting professional relationships throughout the region, might possess exactly the skills necessary to protect everything she'd worked to create. The anniversary celebration I'd been planning with such care and excitement suddenly seemed like a cruel irony, but it also represented something else, an opportunity. If Trevor was planning to serve me with divorce papers in the coming weeks, timing his attack around what he assumed would be my emotional vulnerability, then I had something he didn't expect. Advance warning and time to prepare. Daniel, keep listening and call me with any additional details, I said, my voice now carrying the same confident authority I used when presenting design proposals to demanding clients. I need to make some phone calls of my own. As I hung up the phone and looked around my beautiful home office, the space where I'd built a business empire while believing I was building a life partnership, I realized that Trevor's biggest tactical error wasn't the betrayal itself. It was underestimating the woman who had created all of this success, and assuming that someone capable of building something valuable wouldn't also be capable of protecting it. The student was about to become the teacher, and the lesson Trevor was going to receive about strategic planning would be more expensive than any legal consultation he'd ever purchased. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you. So if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. Alright, let's get back to it. 20 minutes after that devastating phone call, Daniel called back with details that revealed the true scope of Trevor's calculated betrayal. What my brother had overheard wasn't just casual divorce planning. It was a comprehensive strategy designed to systematically dismantle everything I'd built while positioning Trevor as the reasonable party seeking fair resolution. Catherine, you need to hear exactly what they're discussing, Daniel said, his voice tight with controlled anger. I've been recording everything on my phone because this is so calculated and cruel that no one would believe it otherwise. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the phone, but my mind remained focused. The same analytical approach that had helped me manage complex design projects with demanding clients was now being applied to understanding the threat I was facing. Tell me everything, I said, settling into my desk chair and grabbing a notepad to document every detail. The lawyer, he introduced himself as Richard Thornton from Thornton and Associates. He's explaining what he calls optimal timing strategy. Daniel continued. Catherine, they're planning to serve you with divorce papers next Friday, the day before your anniversary weekend. They think hitting you during what should be a celebration will create maximum emotional devastation and minimize your ability to think strategically. Next Friday, the day before our 10th anniversary celebration that I'd been planning for months, the weekend I'd envisioned as a new beginning for our marriage, was actually intended to be the devastating end, timed for maximum psychological impact. But here's the worst part. Daniel's voice dropped to barely controlled fury. Trevor is telling this lawyer that you're too emotionally driven and creatively minded to understand complex financial matters. He actually said, and I quote, Catherine gets completely overwhelmed by business details. She's brilliant at making spaces beautiful, but she has no strategic thinking when it comes to asset protection or legal planning. Too emotionally driven, no strategic thinking. The casual dismissal was breathtaking in its inaccuracy. Trevor was describing someone completely different from the woman who had built Harmony Interiors. Through careful market analysis, strategic client cultivation, and sophisticated financial planning, the woman who had negotiated complex vendor contracts, managed project budgets exceeding 6 figures, and built professional relationships throughout the tri-state area, apparently had no strategic thinking in her husband's assessment. What else are they saying about the business? I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. This is where it gets really ugly, Catherine, Daniel continued. The lawyer is explaining that since Harmony Interiors was established during your marriage, Trevor is entitled to 50% of its value regardless of who did the actual work to build it. They're discussing what they call sweat equity. Apparently, Trevor thinks his emotional support and household management during your business building years constitutes equal contribution to its success. Emotional support and household management. Trevor's version of supporting my business had actually consisted of complaining about my long hours, dismissing my client concerns as drama, and suggesting I should scale back my ambitions to focus more on maintaining our home life. His idea of household management was leaving dishes in the sink and expecting me to handle all meal planning, cleaning coordination, and social calendar management in addition to running my demanding business. But the most infuriating part, Daniel's voice was now shaking with anger, is how they're planning to present you in court. Trevor is building a narrative that you're an unstable creative type who makes impulsive business decisions and needs his steady financial guidance to manage complex assets responsibly, unstable creative type, impulsive business decisions. The man who had watched me systematically build $1 million business through careful planning and strategic thinking was preparing to argue in court that I was mentally and professionally incompetent to manage my own success. Daniel, are they discussing any specific timeline beyond next Friday? I asked, my business instincts focusing on operational details. Yes, and this is clearly been planned for months, Daniel replied. The lawyer mentions that Trevor has been documenting concerning behaviors for the past 6 months. Apparently, he's been keeping some kind of journal about your work schedule, your stress responses, and what he calls emotional volatility during business challenges, documenting concerning behaviors. Trevor had been conducting surveillance on his own wife, creating a fictional narrative of instability to support his legal strategy. Every late night I'd spent perfecting client presentations. Every moment of stress I'd shared with him about challenging projects. Every instance of exhaustion after particularly demanding workdays. He'd been cataloging all of it as evidence of my supposed incompetence. There's more, Daniel continued grimly. They're discussing what they call business disruption strategies. Apparently, Trevor has been in contact with some of your major clients, ostensibly for social reasons, but actually to plant seeds of doubt about your reliability and long-term business stability, business disruption strategies, client manipulation. Trevor hadn't just been planning to steal half my business. He'd been actively working to undermine my professional relationships to weaken my position. Before filing for divorce, which clients? I asked, though I was already reviewing recent interactions and conversations that suddenly seemed suspicious in this new context. I heard him mention the Pemberton project specifically, and something about concerns regarding timeline management and stress-related decision-making. Daniel replied, Catherine, he's been systematically poisoning your professional relationships while pretending to support your career. The Pemberton project, my most prestigious current commission, a complete renovation of a historic estate in Greenwich, that had been featured in Architectural Digest's upcoming fall issue. If Trevor had been undermining my relationship with clients of that caliber, the damage to my professional reputation could extend far beyond whatever he claimed in divorce proceedings. Daniel, I need you to keep listening, but also start documenting everything with timestamps, I said, my voice now carrying the authoritative tone I used when managing crisis situations with difficult clients. Record everything you can legally capture, and note any specific names, dates, or strategies they mention. Already doing it, Daniel confirmed. But Catherine, there's something else you should know. The lawyer asked Trevor about asset concealment concerns. Apparently they're worried you might try to hide money or transfer business assets once you're served with papers. Asset concealment concerns. They were projecting their own tactical thinking onto me, assuming that I would respond to betrayal with the same level of deception they were employing. What they didn't understand was that someone who had built a legitimate business through honest work had no need for concealment strategies. Everything I'd created was properly documented, legally established, and professionally managed. The lawyer is recommending what he calls preemptive asset protection, Daniel continued, his voice growing more disgusted with each revelation. They want to freeze certain accounts and request emergency court orders to prevent you from dissipating marital assets through business operations. Preemptive asset protection, emergency court orders. Trevor's strategy wasn't just to claim half my business. He was planning to paralyze my ability to operate Harmony Interiors while divorce proceedings dragged on for months or potentially years. As I absorbed the full scope of Trevor's calculated assault on everything I'd built, I felt something profound shift inside me. The woman he was describing to his lawyer, emotionally unstable, strategically incompetent, professionally unreliable, bore no resemblance to the person who had created Harmony Interiors through careful planning and systematic execution. But his greatest tactical error was assuming that someone capable of building a successful business from nothing would be unprepared to defend that business against systematic attack. Trevor had confused my commitment to our marriage with naivety about human nature, and my creative profession with an inability to think strategically about protection and planning. "Daniel, I need you to stay there as long as safely possible and document everything," I said, my voice now steady with determined focus. "While Trevor is congratulating himself on his brilliant surprise attack, I'm going to begin implementing some surprise strategies of my own." The woman Trevor was planning to ambush and overwhelm was about to demonstrate exactly what strategic thinking looked like when it was motivated by justice rather than greed. That evening, after Trevor returned home with his usual casual demeanor and fabricated stories about productive client meetings, I began my own investigation with the same methodical precision. I applied to complex design projects. What I discovered over the next 72 hours revealed a pattern of deception so comprehensive that it transformed my understanding of the man I'd been married to for 10 years. My first step was accessing our shared financial accounts and credit card statements, something I'd rarely done since Trevor had always handled our banking and investments, claiming his financial background made him more qualified for money management. What I found during that late-night review session made my blood run cold with a mixture of fury and disbelief. The credit card statements told a story of systematic deception spanning at least 8 months. Regular charges at upscale restaurants in Manhattan, always for exactly 2 people. On evenings when Trevor claimed to be working late at his office or attending boring industry conferences, the amounts suggested lengthy business dinners with expensive wine pairings, the kind of meals designed to impress important clients or, as I now suspected, expensive legal consultants planning elaborate betrayals. More disturbing were the charges. At Meridian Business Consulting, a firm that specialized in what their website described as asset optimization and strategic wealth protection during life transitions, 3 separate payments over the past 4 months, each for substantial amounts that suggested comprehensive business analysis rather than casual consultation. Trevor had been paying professionals to evaluate my business while pretending to support my latest expansion plans. But the most damaging discovery was a recurring monthly charge to Hamilton Investigative Services. Trevor didn't just have a lawyer planning his attack. He'd hired a private investigator to conduct surveillance on his own wife. Every late evening I'd spent at my design studio working on client presentations. Every weekend I'd devoted to site visits and vendor meetings. Every social gathering where I'd networked with potential clients, Trevor had probably known about. All of it through professional surveillance. The scope of his monitoring became clear when I discovered charges for what appeared to be digital forensics services. Trevor had been paying someone to analyze my computer usage, my email communications, and potentially even my phone records. The invasion of privacy was so comprehensive that it suggested months of careful planning, rather than recent divorce considerations. Friday morning brought an unexpected revelation through my assistant, Miranda Kelly, who managed scheduling and client communications for Harmony Interiors. She approached me with concern about strange inquiries our office had been receiving over the past month. "Catherine, I've been meaning to mention this, but we've been getting odd calls from people claiming to research interior design firms for some kind of industry survey," Miranda explained during our weekly planning meeting. "But the questions are incredibly specific about our client contracts, payment schedules, and business insurance policies. When I ask which organization is conducting the research, the callers become evasive and usually hang up. Industry surveys focusing on contracts and insurance policies weren't random market research. They were detailed investigations into the financial structure and stability of my business. Trevor had been having my company researched by professionals, while I believed he was supporting my career growth." "What kind of specific questions?" I asked, though I already suspected the answers would be strategically focused. "Details about our 3-year retainer agreements with high-end clients, whether our business insurance covers partnership disputes, and whether we've implemented any succession planning in case of owner incapacity," Miranda continued, her expression showing growing concern. One caller specifically asked about the Pemberton Estate project and whether we had backup plans if primary leadership became unavailable. Succession planning, owner incapacity, backup leadership plans. Trevor wasn't just researching my current business value. He was investigating whether Harmony Interiors could survive a change in ownership or management. He was determining whether he could potentially take operational control of my client relationships after claiming half the business in divorce proceedings. The weekend brought even more disturbing discoveries when I decided to review our joint investment accounts and retirement planning documents. Trevor had always presented himself as the family financial expert, managing our investment portfolio and retirement contributions, while I focused on building my business. What I discovered was a systematic campaign of financial manipulation that had been occurring right under my nose. Over the past 6 months, Trevor had been gradually liquidating portions of our mutual fund investments and transferring the proceeds into accounts that weren't immediately visible on our standard monthly statements. When I called our investment advisor, Patricia Montrose, I discovered that these transfers had been justified as tax optimization strategies that Trevor claimed. We'd discussed during family financial planning sessions that had never actually occurred. "Mrs. Walsh, your husband mentioned that you wanted to diversify into individual retirement accounts for better asset protection," Patricia explained during our Monday morning phone call. "He said you were concerned about potential business liability issues affecting your shared investments." Business liability issues, asset protection. Trevor had been using fabricated concerns about my business to justify moving our shared investments into accounts that would be more difficult for me to access or monitor during divorce proceedings. He'd been systematically weakening my financial position while claiming to protect our shared interests. More concerning was Patricia's mention of recent discussions about our life insurance policies and beneficiary designations. Trevor had apparently inquired about changing our coverage amounts and exploring options for what he called business continuation insurance. In case something happened to me personally or professionally, business continuation insurance. The implications were chilling. Trevor had been researching not just how to steal my business, but how to maintain control of it if I was somehow removed from the picture entirely. The level of calculating manipulation was so comprehensive that it suggested he'd been planning this betrayal for much longer than the 8 months of documented evidence I'd discovered. Tuesday brought revelations about Trevor's professional activities that explained how he'd been able to conduct such sophisticated planning while maintaining his facade of supportive husband. When I discreetly contacted his business partner, James Morrison, about a supposed anniversary surprise I was planning. I discovered that Trevor's work schedule had been significantly different from what he'd been telling me. "Catherine, that's thoughtful of you to plan something special," James said during our brief phone conversation. "Trevor's been working such reduced hours lately that he definitely deserves a celebration. Most days he's only in the office until about 3 o'clock, and he's been taking a lot of personal time for what he calls important appointments." Reduced hours. Important appointments. While I'd been working 12-hour days to build our financial security and plan our anniversary celebration, Trevor had been essentially working part-time to focus on planning my professional destruction. He'd been using the business freedom that my financial success had provided to orchestrate attacks on that same success. The most disturbing discovery came when I found evidence that Trevor had been creating detailed psychological profiles about my personality, work habits, and stress responses, hidden in his home office desk. I discovered a notebook filled with observations about my behavior during challenging business periods, my reactions to difficult clients, and what he described as emotional instability indicators during times of professional pressure. The notebook read like a surveillance report rather than observations from a loving spouse. Entries included detailed descriptions of evenings when I'd been exhausted after particularly demanding workdays, noting my inability to manage stress professionally, and emotional volatility that could impact business judgment. He'd been documenting normal human responses to challenging work situations as evidence of professional incompetence. Most manipulative were his entries about my dedication to client satisfaction and quality control. Trevor had reframed my commitment to excellence as obsessive perfectionism that interferes with practical business decisions and my willingness to work long hours during project deadlines as inability to establish healthy professional boundaries. By Wednesday evening, I had assembled a comprehensive picture of Trevor's systematic betrayal that extended far beyond simple divorce planning. This was a calculated campaign of financial fraud, privacy invasion, business sabotage, and psychological manipulation that had been conducted over months. While he maintained the facade of a supportive marriage partner, but Trevor's most critical miscalculation was assuming that the woman who had built Harmony Interiors, through strategic planning and careful relationship management, would be unprepared for the kind of comprehensive analysis his attack required. Every skill I'd developed in building my business, market research, competitive analysis, resource allocation, and crisis management, was directly applicable to defending against his assault. While Trevor spent his reduced work hours planning what he believed would be a devastating surprise attack, I was quietly assembling resources and developing strategies that would transform his planned victory into his complete professional and personal destruction. The woman he'd been surveilling and manipulating was about to demonstrate exactly what real strategic thinking looked like when it was applied to protecting, rather than destroying, something valuable. The true extent of Trevor's campaign became horrifyingly clear when I began reaching out to my professional network and discovered that his sabotage efforts extended far beyond what Daniel had overheard at the golf club. What I uncovered over the next few days revealed a systematic attack on my reputation that had been poisoning my business relationships. While I remained completely unaware of the damage being inflicted, the first devastating revelation came from Rebecca Ashford, the editor of Metropolitan Design Quarterly, who had been planning to feature Harmony Interiors in their prestigious Rising Stars of Interior Design issue. She called Wednesday afternoon with news that made me question everything I thought I knew about Trevor's character. "Catherine, I hate to be the bearer of difficult news," But I received a very concerning call last week from someone claiming to be close to your family," Rebecca explained, her voice carrying the uncomfortable tone of someone delivering unwelcome information. "The caller suggested that you've been experiencing some personal challenges that might be affecting your professional reliability. The caller mentioned concerns about your ability to meet deadlines during stressful periods, suggested you've been struggling with what they called work-life balance issues, and implied that your business might be experiencing some internal management problems," Rebecca continued reluctantly. "They recommended that we postpone the feature article until your personal situation stabilizes. Work-life balance issues, internal management problems. Trevor had been systematically destroying my professional reputation by spreading lies to the very publications that could elevate Harmony Interiors to national recognition. The Metropolitan Design Quarterly feature would have been a career-defining opportunity that could have brought clients from across the country." "Rebecca, can you tell me anything else about this caller?" I asked, maintaining my professional composure while internally seething with fury at Trevor's manipulation. "Actually, they claimed to be your brother-in-law, said they were calling out of concern for your well-being and the well-being of your clients," Rebecca replied. "The caller seemed very knowledgeable about your business operations and mentioned specific projects by name, which gave their concerns more credibility." Brother-in-law, Trevor had been impersonating family members to give his sabotage efforts more authenticity. The level of calculated deception was so comprehensive that it demonstrated months of careful planning designed to isolate me professionally and personally. Thursday brought an even more shocking discovery when I received a call from Detective Laura Hamilton with the Maplewood Heights Police Department. She was conducting what she described as a wellness check follow-up based on concerns that had been reported about my mental state and potential safety risks. "Mrs. Walsh, we received a call from someone identifying themselves as your spouse, expressing concerns about your recent behavior and asking us to check on your well-being," Detective Hamilton explained during our phone conversation. "The caller mentioned that you've been working excessively long hours, showing signs of emotional instability, and that they were worried you might be experiencing some kind of breakdown." Emotional instability, potential breakdown. Trevor had contacted law enforcement to create an official record of my supposed mental health problems, presumably to support his future court arguments about my fitness to manage business assets or make important decisions. "Detective Hamilton, can you tell me when this call was made and what specific concerns were raised?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fury building inside me. "The call came in last Friday evening," she replied. "The caller said you'd been staying at your office until very late hours, that neighbors had expressed concerns about your driving when you come home exhausted, and that your family was worried about your judgment during what they called a particularly stressful business period." Last Friday evening. Trevor had made this call immediately after I'd stayed late working on the Pemberton Estate project presentations. He'd taken my dedication to providing excellent client service and transformed it into evidence of mental instability that he reported to law enforcement. The implications were terrifying. Trevor was building an official record with multiple agencies and organizations that could be used to question my competence in court proceedings. If he could demonstrate that police, industry publications, and business associates had all received concerning reports about my stability, it would lend credibility to his narrative about my unfitness to manage significant assets. Friday brought revelations that extended Trevor's sabotage into my personal relationships and social networks. When I called my longtime friend Sarah Winters to confirm dinner plans for the following week, She hesitantly mentioned conversations she'd had with Trevor that had left her confused and concerned. "Catherine, I hope you don't mind me asking, but Trevor called me a couple of weeks ago asking about your stress levels and whether I'd noticed any changes in your behavior lately," Sarah said carefully. "He seemed really worried about you and mentioned that you'd been having some kind of difficulties at work. Trevor had been systematically contacting my friends to gather ammunition for his character assassination campaign, while simultaneously planting doubts about my mental state and professional competence." "What kind of specific questions did he ask?" I inquired, though I was already beginning to understand the scope of his information-gathering operation. "He wanted to know if you'd seemed anxious or overwhelmed during our recent conversations, whether you'd mentioned any business problems, and if I thought you might benefit from professional counseling to help manage work stress," Sarah continued, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Catherine, it felt strange that he was asking me these things instead of talking directly with you about his concerns. Professional counseling for work stress." Trevor was not only documenting my supposed problems but also establishing a narrative that suggested professional intervention was necessary for my mental health. This created additional evidence he could use to argue that I was unfit to make important business or financial decisions. The weekend brought the most devastating discovery of all when I learned that Trevor had been manipulating my relationship with my own family members. My sister Emily called Saturday morning with questions that revealed the extent of his psychological manipulation campaign. "Catherine, Mom asked me to call you because she's been worried sick after conversations she's had with Trevor," Emily said, her voice filled with genuine concern. "He's been telling her that you're working yourself into some kind of nervous breakdown, and that he's afraid you're going to make some kind of drastic decision that will destroy everything you've built. Drastic decisions that would destroy everything I'd built." Trevor had been using my own mother's love and concern for me as weapons in his campaign to isolate me from family support while building evidence for his legal strategy. "Emily, what specific things has Trevor told Mom?" I asked, though I was already prepared for another layer of systematic manipulation. "He said you've been having mood swings related to business pressure, that you've mentioned feeling overwhelmed by client demands, and that he's concerned you might do something impulsive with your business that you'll regret later," Emily explained. "Mom was asking if she should come visit to help support you through whatever crisis you're apparently going through. Mood swings, impulsive business decisions, crisis requiring family intervention." Trevor had been manufacturing a mental health emergency that didn't exist, while positioning himself as the concerned husband seeking help for his unstable wife. But the most insidious aspect of his family manipulation was how he'd been using their genuine love for me as evidence of my problems. Every expression of concern from my mother or sister that resulted from his lies became additional proof that multiple people had noticed my declining mental state. Sunday evening brought a phone call from my business attorney, David Chen, who had represented Harmony Interiors during our incorporation and expansion processes. His call revealed that Trevor's sabotage had extended into my legal and financial professional relationships. "Catherine, I received an unusual inquiry last week from an attorney claiming to represent your family's interests in some kind of estate planning matter," David explained. "They were asking detailed questions about your business structure, ownership documentation, and whether there were any partnership agreements or succession plans in place. Estate planning matters, family interests." Trevor had been having legal professionals research my business structure under false pretenses presumably to identify vulnerabilities he could exploit during divorce proceedings. David, did this attorney provide any specific information about what kind of estate planning they were supposedly handling? I asked, already knowing that this was another element of Trevor's reconnaissance operation. They claimed to be updating family trusts and wanted to ensure that business assets were properly documented for inheritance purposes. David replied, but their questions were more focused on current operational control and decision-making authority than typical estate planning concerns. As I absorbed the full scope of Trevor's systematic campaign against my professional reputation, personal relationships, and family connections, I realized that his betrayal extended far beyond planning a divorce. This was a comprehensive destruction campaign designed to isolate me from every source of support, while building a legal case that I was mentally unstable and professionally incompetent. Trevor had been weaponizing the love and concern of everyone who cared about me, transforming their natural worry into evidence against my character and competence. He'd been creating official records with law enforcement, sabotaging media opportunities, and poisoning professional relationships while maintaining the facade of a worried, supportive husband. But his most critical error was assuming that someone capable of building a successful business through genuine relationships and professional competence would be unable to recognize and counter a campaign based on lies and manipulation. While Trevor had been spreading poison throughout my network, he'd also been creating a comprehensive trail of evidence that would ultimately expose his own fraudulent behavior. Monday morning arrived with a crystalline moment of clarity that transformed my entire perspective on the situation I was facing. As I sat in my design studio, surrounded by the portfolio of beautiful homes I'd created and the evidence of professional success I'd built through genuine relationships and honest work, something fundamental shifted inside me. The woman Trevor was systematically trying to destroy through lies and manipulation was about to demonstrate exactly what real strategic thinking looked like when it was applied to justice rather than deception. The revelation came as I was reviewing the comprehensive notes I'd compiled about Trevor's campaign against me. Spread across my drafting table were timelines of his financial fraud, documentation of his reputation sabotage, evidence of his family manipulation, and records of his professional surveillance. What I saw wasn't just betrayal, it was a pattern of tactical errors that revealed Trevor's complete misunderstanding of who he was fighting and what weapons were actually available to both sides. Trevor's first critical miscalculation was assuming that someone who had built Harmony Interiors through strategic planning and relationship management would be unable to recognize and counter a campaign based on systematic deception. Every skill I developed in growing my business, market analysis, competitive assessment, resource allocation, and crisis management, was directly applicable to defending against his assault. The same analytical thinking that had helped me transform client visions into beautiful realities was perfectly suited for dismantling his attack strategy piece by piece. His second major error was underestimating the strength and loyalty of the professional network I'd spent 10 years carefully cultivating. Trevor had been spreading lies to people who knew me personally and professionally, assuming that manufactured concerns would override years of demonstrated competence and reliability. What he hadn't considered was that my clients, colleagues, and industry contacts had direct experience with my work quality, professional integrity, and personal character. His fabricated stories about my instability would be easily refuted by people who had worked with me through challenging projects and high-pressure deadlines. But Trevor's most devastating mistake was documenting his own criminal behavior so thoroughly. While planning what he believed would be an overwhelming surprise attack, every payment to private investigators was recorded on our shared credit cards. Every conversation with divorce attorneys had been overheard by my brother. Every attempt to manipulate my family and friends had created witnesses who could testify about his deceptive tactics. His months of careful planning had actually created a comprehensive evidence trail that would expose his fraud more effectively than any investigation I could have conducted independently. As I began developing what I mentally called Operation Restoration, I realized that my professional background had provided me with resources Trevor couldn't even comprehend. Building a successful interior design business required managing complex projects with multiple stakeholders, navigating regulatory requirements, handling difficult personalities, and maintaining calm professionalism under extreme pressure. These were exactly the skills necessary for orchestrating a comprehensive legal and professional defense against someone attempting to steal what I'd built. My first strategic advantage was understanding people and relationships in ways that Trevor's financial consulting background had never required. Interior design was fundamentally about understanding what people truly wanted versus what they said they wanted, reading between the lines of difficult conversations, and building trust with clients who were investing significant money in personal visions. These psychological insights were invaluable for anticipating Trevor's next moves and understanding the motivations behind his campaign. My second advantage was the extensive network of professional relationships I developed throughout the tri-state area. Unlike Trevor's business connections, which were primarily transactional and competitive, my client relationships were built on trust, personal service, and long-term satisfaction. These weren't just customers who had purchased services. They were people whose homes I'd transformed, whose families I'd gotten to know, and whose lives I'd genuinely improved. Through careful attention to their needs and preferences, the difference in our professional approaches suddenly seemed prophetic. Trevor's consulting work involved analyzing businesses from the outside, identifying problems, and recommending changes that other people would implement. My work required building something beautiful and functional from nothing, managing every detail of complex projects, and taking personal responsibility for outcomes that would affect people's daily lives. For years to come, his approach was theoretical and detached. Mine was practical and deeply invested in real results. Tuesday morning brought a crucial realization about the legal and financial advantages I possessed that Trevor had apparently overlooked during his months of planning. When I called my business insurance agent, Margaret Fleming, to discuss potential coverage issues, I discovered that Harmony Interiors had protections that would be crucial in the coming battle. Catherine, your comprehensive business protection policy includes coverage for reputation damage, business interruption caused by personal legal issues, and what we call key person protection. Margaret explained during our detailed review. If someone were to attack your business through false statements or malicious interference, you'd have both legal support and financial protection. Business interruption protection, reputation damage coverage, legal support for malicious interference. While Trevor had been paying investigators to research ways to attack my business, I had been responsibly purchasing insurance protections that would shield Harmony Interiors from exactly the kind of assault he was planning. More importantly, Margaret's review revealed that my business structure included protections I'd implemented years earlier on the advice of my business attorney. Harmony Interiors was established as a limited liability company with clear documentation that all assets, intellectual property, and client relationships belonged to the business entity rather than to me personally. Trevor's claims to marital property rights would have to overcome the legal reality that the business was a separate entity, with its own protected assets. Wednesday brought another strategic revelation when I reviewed my professional certifications and industry credentials. Over the past decade, I'd earned advanced certifications from the American Society of Interior Designers, completed specialized training in sustainable design practices, and maintained memberships in exclusive professional organizations that required demonstrated competence and ethical standards. These credentials weren't just resume decorations, they represented formal recognition from industry peers that I possessed the expertise and character necessary for professional leadership. Trevor's campaign to portray me as emotionally unstable and professionally incompetent would have to overcome the reality that multiple prestigious organizations had formally certified my qualifications and ethical standards. His fabricated concerns about my judgment and reliability would be contradicted by official endorsements from industry experts who had evaluated my work according to rigorous professional standards. But my most powerful strategic advantage was something Trevor couldn't have anticipated because it was rooted in genuine character rather than calculated tactics. 10 years of building harmony interiors had taught me the difference between short-term manipulation and long-term relationship building. Every client I'd served, every contractor I'd worked with, and every professional colleague I'd collaborated with had experienced my actual character. Under both routine and pressure situations, Trevor's lies about my competence and stability would be evaluated by people who had personally witnessed my professionalism during challenging projects, my reliability during tight deadlines, and my integrity during complex negotiations. His manufactured crisis would be compared against years of demonstrated excellence in situations that required exactly the kinds of judgment and emotional stability he was claiming I lacked. Thursday evening brought the most empowering realization of all as I began understanding how Trevor's overconfidence and arrogance had created vulnerabilities that I could exploit strategically. He had assumed that his business background made him superior at planning and analysis, but his approach revealed fundamental ignorance about the legal and professional complexities of attacking an established business with documented success and strong industry relationships. Trevor had been fighting a theoretical battle based on assumptions about divorce law and asset division, while I would be fighting a practical battle based on documented evidence, professional relationships, and proven competence. His strategy was designed to overwhelm an emotionally devastated victim, but it was completely inadequate for confronting someone who understood business warfare and had both the resources and motivation to fight back strategically. The woman Trevor was planning to surprise and defeat was about to demonstrate that someone who had built something meaningful from nothing possessed exactly the skills necessary to protect that achievement against systematic attack. His months of planning had positioned him for victory against an opponent who didn't exist. The unstable, incompetent wife he'd created in his imagination, rather than the strategic business owner he'd actually been living with for 10 years. Friday morning marked the beginning of the most intensive strategic planning period of my life, as I began assembling the legal, financial, and professional resources necessary to not just defend against Trevor's attack, but to ensure he faced meaningful consequences for his systematic fraud and manipulation. Working with the same methodical precision I applied to complex design projects, I initiated what would become a comprehensive counteroffensive that would transform his planned surprise into his complete destruction. My first crucial call went to Victoria Sterling, a family law attorney whose expertise in high-stakes divorce cases involving significant business assets had been recommended by 3 different clients who had faced similar situations. Unlike Trevor's choice to work with what appeared to be an aggressive firm, focused on destruction tactics, I specifically sought someone who understood the complexities of protecting established businesses and legitimate professional reputations during marital dissolution. Mrs. Walsh, based on your preliminary description, what you're facing goes far beyond typical divorce planning, Victoria explained during our confidential consultation at her downtown office. The systematic surveillance, financial manipulation, and reputation sabotage you've documented suggests a pattern of behavior that could constitute criminal fraud rather than simply aggressive marital tactics. Criminal fraud. Victoria's assessment validated my growing understanding that Trevor's behavior had crossed legal boundaries that extended far beyond family law into potential prosecution territory. Her initial review of the evidence I'd compiled was both professionally thorough and personally validating. Your husband's activities appeared to violate several state and federal laws, Victoria continued, studying the timeline I'd prepared showing Trevor's financial transfers, surveillance payments, and reputation. Sabotage campaign, unauthorized access to business accounts, systematic invasion of privacy, and fraudulent misrepresentation to third parties are serious crimes that could result in both civil and criminal penalties. Working with Victoria, I discovered that my business structure and financial management practices had created legal protections that would be devastating to Trevor's claims. Harmony Interiors was established using inheritance funds I'd received before our marriage. All subsequent investments were clearly documented as separate property, and Trevor had never been listed on any business licenses, insurance policies, or commercial agreements. Mrs. Walsh, your husband's legal strategy appears to be based on fundamental misunderstandings about marital property law, Victoria explained during our detailed asset review. His claim to 50% of your business value has no legal foundation when the business was established with separate property, maintained with separate funds, and operated independently of any contribution from him. But Victoria's most valuable insight concerned Trevor's tactical errors and how they would backfire in court proceedings. His systematic campaign to portray me as mentally unstable and professionally incompetent had actually created evidence that would expose his own fraudulent behavior while demonstrating his unfitness as a credible witness. Your husband has documented his own misconduct so thoroughly that prosecutors are calling this one of the most complete fraud cases they've ever encountered, Victoria observed with professional satisfaction. Every payment to investigators, every false statement to third parties, every attempt to manipulate official records. He's essentially built the criminal case against himself. My second critical consultation was with Alexander Morrison, a forensic accountant whose specialized practice focused on financial fraud investigation and asset protection during complex divorces. Unlike the business consultants Trevor had hired to estimate my company's value for theft purposes, Alexander's job was to establish definitive proof of how Harmony Interiors had been created, funded, and maintained entirely through my individual efforts. Mrs. Walsh, your financial records demonstrate textbook separation of marital and business assets, Alexander explained during our comprehensive review session. Every dollar of business growth can be traced directly to your personal investments, professional activities, and individual client relationships. More importantly, we can demonstrate that your husband's minimal involvement actually created measurable costs, rather than contributing value. Alexander's analysis revealed something that would prove devastating to any claims Trevor might make about contributing to my business success. Not only had he never provided financial support, labor, or professional expertise to Harmony Interiors. But his occasional presence at business events had actually increased our insurance premiums, created additional liability exposures, and generated administrative costs related to his inclusion in company activities. In forensic accounting terms, Alexander continued, "Your husband has been a net drain on business resources, rather than a contributor to business value. Any legal claim he makes to ownership or control will be easily refuted with quantitative evidence that demonstrates his negative impact on company operations." My third strategic consultation involved Rebecca Torres, a private investigator whose expertise in corporate fraud cases would be crucial for documenting Trevor's criminal activities and building evidence for both civil and criminal proceedings. Working with Rebecca, I began developing what she called a comprehensive accountability strategy that would ensure Trevor faced consequences not just for the divorce fraud, but for the broader pattern of illegal behavior he had engaged in. "Mrs. Walsh, your husband's activities constitute what we call systematic criminal conspiracy," Rebecca explained during our initial strategy session. "The surveillance, the financial fraud, the attempts to manipulate official records. These activities could violate multiple federal laws, including wire fraud, computer crimes, and conspiracy to commit theft." Rebecca's investigation had already uncovered details that shocked even me about the scope of Trevor's surveillance operation. The private investigators he'd hired had been conducting not just financial research, but comprehensive lifestyle monitoring that included tracking my daily routines, photographing my business activities, and potentially recording private conversations without consent. "Your husband has been building what appears to be a comprehensive psychological profile, designed to support claims that you're mentally unstable," Rebecca continued. "The surveillance reports include observations about your work schedule, your social interactions, and your personal habits. This isn't divorce preparation. It's character assassination research that may violate numerous privacy laws. But Rebecca's most valuable discovery was evidence that Trevor had been actively attempting to create the very problems he claimed to be documenting. Phone records showed he had contacted several of my contractors and vendors with false claims about my business stability, apparently trying to create actual difficulties that would support his narrative about my professional incompetence. "Mrs. Walsh, your husband hasn't just been documenting supposed problems, he's been actively trying to sabotage your business relationships to create the evidence he needed for his legal strategy," Rebecca explained. "This transforms his activities from passive surveillance into active criminal interference with your professional operations. Working with my expanded legal team, I discovered that Trevor's overconfidence had led him to make tactical errors that would be catastrophic for his position in any legal proceedings. His systematic documentation of his own illegal activities, combined with his underestimation of my professional capabilities and legal protections, had created a situation where his planned attack would become evidence of his own criminal behavior. Mrs. Walsh, your husband appears to have spent months preparing for a battle against someone who doesn't exist," Victoria observed during our final strategy session. "His entire approach assumes you're an unsophisticated victim who would be overwhelmed by legal complexity and unable to mount an effective defense. He's prepared for the wrong opponent entirely." The beauty of Trevor's approach was that he had created a comprehensive evidence trail of his own misconduct, while believing he was conducting sophisticated planning. Every meeting with investigators was documented on credit card statements. Every false statement to third parties had created witnesses to his deception, and every attempt to manipulate official records had left paper trails that would be easily traced during investigation. By the end of the week, I had assembled a legal and investigative team that possessed resources and expertise far superior to anything Trevor had consulted. More importantly, my team was working to expose and prosecute actual criminal behavior, while his team had been helping him commit crimes that would ultimately destroy his personal and professional life. The most empowering realization was understanding that every advantage Trevor thought he possessed was actually a vulnerability that could be exploited through superior preparation and legitimate legal strategy. His arrogance about his business expertise had blinded him to the legal complexities of attacking an established business. His confidence in his deception skills had led him to create comprehensive evidence of his own fraud. His assumption about my naivety had prevented him from recognizing that he was fighting someone with both the resources and motivation to ensure he faced meaningful consequences for his betrayal. While Trevor spent his final days of preparation believing he was orchestrating a brilliant surprise attack, I was implementing a counter-strategy that would transform his planned victory into his complete personal, professional, and legal destruction. The woman he had systematically underestimated was about to demonstrate exactly what strategic thinking looked like when it was motivated by justice rather than greed. Friday morning arrived with the electric tension of impending warfare as I prepared to execute what Victoria Sterling had dubbed Operation Justice, a comprehensive counterattack that would transform Trevor's planned surprise into the most devastating day of his professional and personal life. At exactly 7:30 a.m., 30 minutes before Trevor typically left for what I now knew were his final coordination meetings with his legal team, I initiated the first phase of a strategic offensive that would demonstrate the difference between calculated planning and criminal conspiracy. The first call went to our primary bank, Riverside Financial, where I had spent the previous week establishing relationships with senior management and documenting the unauthorized access Trevor had been conducting on our accounts. Unlike the gradual, secretive asset movement Trevor had been planning, my approach was immediate, comprehensive, and backed by court orders that Victoria had secured based on evidence of financial fraud. "This is Catherine Walsh," I said to bank manager Patricia Thornfield, who had been briefed on the situation during my previous visits. "I need to implement the fraud protection measures we discussed. There's documented evidence that unauthorized individuals have been accessing our accounts with criminal intent. Within minutes, every account that bore both our names was frozen pending investigation, not the careful, strategic asset division Trevor had been planning, but immediate comprehensive lockdown based on documented evidence of attempted theft. Every credit line, every investment account, every financial instrument that Trevor thought he could manipulate was suddenly inaccessible to him, while remaining available to me through the business accounts he had never been authorized to access. The second call went to Detective Samuel Rodriguez at the Maplewood Heights Financial Crimes Division, who had been working with federal investigators to build criminal cases based on the evidence Rebecca Torres had compiled. Unlike the civil divorce proceedings Trevor was expecting, this conversation was about criminal charges that could result in federal prosecution, professional ruin, and potential imprisonment. "Mrs. Walsh, based on the evidence your team provided, this week, we're issuing arrest warrants for computer fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft," Detective Rodriguez confirmed. "Mr. Walsh will be taken into custody this afternoon for questioning about his systematic criminal activities, arrest warrants, federal charges." While Trevor was presumably reviewing his final preparations for serving me with divorce papers, his entire legal and financial strategy was collapsing in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The third call was perhaps the most satisfying. I contacted the State Bar Association's Ethics Enforcement Division to report that Trevor's attorney, Richard Thornton, appeared to be participating in a criminal conspiracy rather than providing legitimate legal representation. The evidence suggested they had been coordinating criminal activities while using attorney-client privilege as cover for fraudulent planning. The documentation indicates systematic criminal fraud disguised as divorce preparation. I explained to ethics investigator Margaret Chen. This extends far beyond aggressive legal representation into potential criminal conspiracy that violates multiple professional standards. By 8:15 a.m., while Trevor was likely having coffee and congratulating himself on his brilliant timing, his entire world was systematically imploding through legal channels he had never anticipated. The bank notifications, criminal investigation, alerts, and ethics complaints were creating a cascade of consequences that would destroy not just his divorce strategy, but his professional career and personal freedom. The first indication of his impending disaster came at 8:47 a.m. when his phone rang during what I knew was his final strategy meeting with his legal team. From my position in our kitchen, I could hear his confident morning demeanor instantly transform into confusion and growing panic as he received notification that our joint accounts had been frozen due to fraud investigations. "What do you mean, fraud investigation?" Trevor's voice carried clearly through the house, sharp with disbelief and rising alarm. "This has to be some kind of mistake. I haven't done anything fraudulent." Within minutes, his phone was ringing again, this time with notification from Richard Thornton's office that they were withdrawing from representation due to ethics investigations and potential criminal liability. The law firm that had been planning his aggressive assault was abandoning him to avoid prosecution for participating in criminal conspiracy. By 9:15 a.m., Trevor had returned home from his aborted legal meeting, his face pale with shock and his usual confident composure completely shattered. He burst through our front door like a man whose parachute had been replaced with an anvil, his carefully planned timeline disrupted by consequences he had never anticipated. "Catherine, something's wrong with our bank accounts," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "They're claiming there's a fraud investigation, and my lawyer won't return my calls. This has to be some kind of misunderstanding." I maintained the calm, measured tone I used with difficult clients while watching his world collapse in real time. "Trevor, I don't think it's a misunderstanding. It sounds like your activities over the past few months have attracted some very serious attention from law enforcement." "My activities?" His voice cracked with desperation as he began to understand that his brilliant surprise attack had somehow become a catastrophic defeat. "I haven't done anything wrong. I was just preparing for divorce proceedings, which is completely legal." "Divorce proceedings?" I paused thoughtfully, savoring the moment of truth I had been anticipating for weeks. "Is that what you call unauthorized access to business banking systems? Is that how you describe hiring investigators to conduct illegal surveillance? Is that your term for systematically defrauding your wife while planning to steal her business?" The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds as Trevor processed that his months of careful planning had been discovered and countered. When he spoke again, his voice had lost all its earlier confidence and carried the desperate tone of someone whose entire worldview was collapsing. "Catherine, you don't understand. I can explain everything. This is all a misunderstanding. We don't need lawyers and investigators. We can handle this privately." "Actually, Trevor, I understand perfectly," I replied with the satisfaction of someone who had just completed a complex project ahead of schedule and under budget. You spent months planning what you thought would be a surprise attack on an unsuspecting wife. What you actually did was document your own criminal misconduct so thoroughly that federal prosecutors are calling it one of the most comprehensive evidence packages they've ever seen. Evidence packages. Prosecutors. His voice was now shaking with genuine terror as he began to comprehend the scope of his legal jeopardy. Catherine, we can work this out. We don't need to involve criminal charges. I'll give you whatever you want in the divorce. I'm afraid it's too late for private negotiations, Trevor, I continued, maintaining my professional composure while watching justice unfold in real time. When you committed wire fraud, computer crimes, and systematic theft, it stopped being a private marital matter. These are federal charges that will be prosecuted regardless of my personal preferences. At 2 p.m. sharp, while I was conducting a stress management workshop for my design team about handling difficult client situations, Detective Rodriguez and 2 federal agents were arresting Trevor at his office for criminal fraud and conspiracy charges. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was teaching people how to maintain composure under pressure while my husband was discovering what real pressure felt like for the first time in his life. The afternoon brought a steady stream of updates from Victoria's office as Trevor's situation deteriorated with mathematical precision. His hastily retained criminal defense attorney was apparently struggling to find any angle of defense that didn't involve admitting to the extensive criminal misconduct we had documented so thoroughly. Mrs. Walsh, Mr. Walsh's new attorney has requested an emergency meeting to discuss potential plea agreements, Victoria reported during our 4 p.m. call. They're apparently hoping to avoid federal prosecution by offering full restitution and cooperation with investigators. Plea agreements. Trevor had gone from planning to steal my business to begging prosecutors not to send him to federal prison for the crimes he had committed while planning that theft. His transformation from confident predator to desperate defendant had taken less than 8 hours. By 5 p.m., the final element of Trevor's destruction was complete. The State Bar Association had opened formal investigations into both Richard Thornton and his law firm for potential criminal conspiracy, effectively destroying their professional reputations. While Trevor faced criminal charges that could result in years of imprisonment, as I locked up Harmony Interiors that evening and reflected on the day's events, I felt a profound sense of justice that went beyond personal satisfaction. Trevor had spent months planning to destroy everything I had built through systematic criminal behavior. Instead, his overconfidence and fundamental misunderstanding of who he was fighting had led him to document his own criminal misconduct so thoroughly that his planned victory had become his complete surrender. The woman he had dismissed as too emotional and creative to understand strategic planning had just demonstrated that someone capable of building a successful business from nothing was also capable of orchestrating the complete destruction of anyone foolish enough to threaten that business through criminal means. The week following Trevor's arrest brought a cascade of consequences that demonstrated how thoroughly his criminal conspiracy had backfired, transforming what he had intended as my professional and personal destruction into his complete obliteration from every aspect of the life we had shared. What unfolded was a masterclass in how comprehensive preparation and superior intelligence could turn attempted victimization into overwhelming justice that extended far beyond anything I could have imagined. Monday morning's emergency court hearing drew an unprecedented crowd for what should have been routine divorce proceedings. Word had spread through Maplewood Heights legal community about the criminal charges, the federal investigation, and the spectacular reversal of what had been expected to be a standard asset division case. Judge Harrison Blackwell entered the packed courtroom with the stern expression of someone who had spent his weekend reviewing evidence of systematic fraud and criminal conspiracy. "This is highly unusual," Judge Blackwell began, his voice carrying the authority of decades on the bench. "What was filed as a divorce proceeding has revealed evidence of criminal misconduct that requires immediate judicial intervention to protect both the integrity of these proceedings and the rights of the plaintiff." Trevor sat beside his hastily retained criminal defense attorney, looking nothing like the confident business consultant who had been planning his surprise attack. Just days earlier, his expensive suits had been replaced by the rumpled appearance of someone who had spent the weekend in county lockup, and his usual commanding presence had been replaced by the defeated posture of a man whose entire world had collapsed. "Mr. Walsh," Judge Blackwell continued, systematically reviewing the evidence Victoria had filed. "The documentation presented by the plaintiff includes proof of unauthorized computer access, systematic theft of marital assets, fraudulent business practices, and what appears to be conspiracy to commit multiple felonies. These are serious criminal charges that extend far beyond family law jurisdiction." The judge's methodical review of Trevor's criminal behavior was devastating in its thoroughness. He presented each element of the conspiracy from the unauthorized surveillance to the systematic reputation sabotage, from the financial fraud to the attempts at business interference. Most damning was the judge's analysis of Trevor's character assassination campaign and how it revealed his unfitness as a credible witness in any legal proceeding. "Most concerning," Judge Blackwell observed, "is the premeditated nature of these crimes. This wasn't impulsive misconduct during a difficult divorce. This was months of calculated criminal planning, designed to systematically defraud the plaintiff of assets she legally owns." Trevor's attorney attempted a weak defense, claiming that his client's actions were motivated by legitimate concerns about marital assets and proper preparation for divorce proceedings. Judge Blackwell's response was withering and comprehensive. "Counselor, unauthorized access to computer systems is a federal crime regardless of motivation. Theft of retirement funds without spousal consent is criminal fraud regardless of marital status. Your client's supposed concerns don't transform criminal behavior into legitimate legal strategy." The judge's final ruling exceeded even Victoria's optimistic projections. All emergency motions filed by Trevor were denied. All claims to my separate business property were dismissed with prejudice, and the court issued immediate orders for full restitution of all stolen assets plus punitive damages for business interference and reputation repair. But Judge Blackwell wasn't finished. He also referred the case to federal prosecutors for additional charges related to computer crimes and wire fraud, prohibited Trevor from any contact with my business operations or professional relationships, and ordered him to pay all legal fees associated with defending against his criminal conspiracy. Tuesday brought news that Trevor's professional destruction was accelerating beyond even my most optimistic expectations. Detective Rodriguez called with updates that demonstrated how thoroughly his criminal behavior had been documented and how rapidly the consequences were multiplying. "Mrs. Walsh, your ex-husband's case has been transferred to federal jurisdiction due to the computer crimes and interstate fraud components," Detective Rodriguez explained. "The FBI's white-collar crime division is particularly interested in his use of commercial banking systems and interstate communications to commit systematic fraud." Federal jurisdiction meant that Trevor was facing potential prison sentences measured in years rather than months, and that his criminal record would permanently disqualify him from any professional activities involving financial services or business consulting. The career he had spent 15 years building was effectively over. More importantly for my situation, the federal investigation had uncovered additional evidence of Trevor's criminal activities that even I hadn't discovered. Bank records showed that he had been systematically skimming money from our joint accounts for over a year, creating hidden reserves that he planned to use for post-divorce financial security, while claiming poverty to minimize alimony obligations. Wednesday's revelation came through Victoria's connections in the legal community. Richard Thornton and Associates, the law firm Trevor had chosen for their aggressive tactics, was facing catastrophic professional consequences for their participation in what investigators were now calling a comprehensive criminal enterprise. The State Bar Association has suspended the entire firm's practicing licenses pending investigation. Victoria reported with undisguised satisfaction. They're being investigated for knowingly participating in criminal fraud while representing it as legitimate legal strategy. The irony was perfect. The law firm that had specialized in destroying people's lives through scorched earth tactics was discovering that their unethical methods only worked against unprepared opponents. When faced with comprehensive documentation and superior legal strategy, their aggressive approach had become evidence of their own criminal conspiracy. But Wednesday also brought unexpected validation from sources I had never anticipated. Metropolitan Design Quarterly, the publication that Trevor had sabotaged with false concerns about my stability, called to apologize and offer expanded coverage of my business success story. Mrs. Walsh, after learning about the criminal fraud case, we realized that the concerns raised about your business were part of a systematic deception campaign. Editor Rebecca Ashford explained during our conversation. We'd like to feature Harmony Interiors in our upcoming Triumph Over Adversity issue, highlighting how you protected your business against criminal attack. The article that Trevor had destroyed through lies was being transformed into a much larger feature story about business protection and strategic thinking. His sabotage had backfired so completely that it was creating positive publicity opportunities that exceeded anything I could have achieved through normal channels. Thursday brought perhaps the most satisfying development when I received calls from 3 major clients whose relationships Trevor had attempted to poison with his manufactured concerns about my reliability and competence, instead of the damaged professional relationships he had intended to create. His sabotage attempts had actually strengthened my client connections and generated additional business opportunities. Catherine, after learning about your husband's fraud attempts, we want to expand our contract with Harmony Interiors, explained Jonathan Pemberton, whose Greenwich Estate project had been specifically targeted by Trevor's sabotage campaign. Anyone who could manage a complex criminal defense while maintaining perfect project execution clearly possesses exactly the kind of strategic thinking and crisis management skills we want in our design team. The Pemberton contract expansion alone was worth more than Trevor's annual income from his consulting practice. His attempts to undermine my most prestigious client relationship had instead generated the largest single contract in Harmony Interiors history. Friday brought the final element of Trevor's complete destruction when his former business partner, James Morrison, called to inform me that they were terminating Trevor's partnership and pursuing legal action to recover any company resources he might have misappropriated during his criminal activities. Mrs. Walsh, Mackenzie and Associates had no knowledge of Mr. Walsh's criminal behavior. James explained during our conversation. We're conducting a comprehensive audit of his client relationships and financial activities to ensure no company resources were involved in his illegal schemes. Trevor's professional career was effectively over. No consulting firm would hire someone with federal fraud convictions and his former partners were treating him as a liability to be eliminated rather than a colleague to be supported. But the week's most profound validation came from an unexpected source: my own family members, who had been manipulated by Trevor's lies about my supposed mental health problems. My mother called Friday evening with an apology that was both heartfelt and illuminating. "Catherine, I feel terrible about how Trevor manipulated our concern for you," my mother said, her voice filled with regret and admiration. "What he described as emotional instability was actually you quietly building a defense against his criminal attacks. You were protecting yourself and your business while he was lying to everyone who loves you." As I reflected on the week's developments from my design studio, surrounded by the evidence of genuine success built through honest work and authentic relationships, I felt a profound sense of justice that went beyond personal vindication. Trevor had attempted to destroy everything meaningful in my life through systematic criminal behavior, but his overconfidence and fundamental misunderstanding of my capabilities had led to his complete destruction while my business emerged stronger than ever. 18 months later, I stood in the grand opening ceremony of Harmony Interior's second location in downtown Metropolitan Heights, watching Mayor Elizabeth Carter cut the ceremonial ribbon while local news cameras captured the moment that represented the most extraordinary period of growth in my professional life. The transformation had been nothing short of remarkable. What Trevor had intended to destroy through criminal conspiracy had instead evolved into a design empire that now served clients across 5 states and had become a model for business resilience and strategic protection. The 20,000-square-foot Metropolitan Heights showroom featured cutting-edge design technology, interactive client consultation suites, and specialized departments for luxury residential, corporate environments, and historic restoration projects. What had once been Harmony Interiors, the successful but regional design firm that Trevor dismissed as my little decorating business, had become the Northeast's premier interior design destination, generating annual revenue that exceeded his former consulting firm's entire client portfolio by over 300%. Mrs. Walsh, this expansion represents exactly the kind of innovative business leadership our community needs, Mayor Carter announced to the gathered crowd of business leaders, clients, and design professionals. Harmony Interiors has become a model for how strategic thinking, professional integrity, and crisis management can transform potential destruction into extraordinary growth. The irony was profound and satisfying. Trevor had once suggested I wasn't capable of Fortune 500 material success. Yet my client roster now included executives from 15 Fortune 500 companies, 3 major universities, to professional sports organizations, and numerous celebrities whose homes had been featured in national publications. The emotionally unstable creative type he had described to his lawyers was now regularly invited to speak at Harvard Business School, Wharton, and other prestigious institutions about crisis management and business protection strategies. The past year and a half had brought opportunities I could never have imagined during those dark days. When I first discovered Trevor's betrayal, the International Business Women's Association had awarded me their Entrepreneur of the Year recognition. Architectural Digest had featured Harmony Interiors in their design firms to watch cover story. 3 major publishers were competing to publish my upcoming book about building resilient business practices and protecting against internal threats. But perhaps most satisfying was the consulting practice I had developed specifically for business owners facing similar threats. Strategic Asset Protection Services had become a specialized division of Harmony Interiors, helping entrepreneurs, particularly women, safeguard their businesses against potential fraud, manipulation, and theft by partners, spouses, or business associates. The lessons learned from Trevor's attempted destruction had become valuable services for others facing comparable dangers. The key insight isn't about divorce or betrayal specifically. I explained to a packed auditorium at the Women's Business Leadership Conference in Chicago last month. It's about recognizing that thorough preparation and strategic thinking aren't paranoia. They're professional responsibility. Someone capable of building something valuable should also be capable of protecting it from those who would steal rather than create. That protection mindset had transformed not just my business practices, but my entire approach to professional relationships and personal security. Every contract now included comprehensive fraud protection clauses. Every business partnership required detailed documentation of contributions and responsibilities. And every financial decision was backed by forensic-level record-keeping. That would satisfy the most aggressive legal scrutiny. The impact extended far beyond my individual success. The precedent established by Trevor's prosecution had been cited in over 20 other financial fraud cases, where business owners fought back against attempted theft by partners or spouses. The comprehensive documentation standards I had implemented were being taught in business schools as best practices for asset protection and fraud prevention. Legal firms across the country were referring clients to our case as an example of how proper preparation could transform potential victimization into overwhelming legal victory. Trevor's criminal case had concluded 8 months ago with a plea agreement that reflected the overwhelming evidence of his systematic fraud. 3 years in federal prison, 5 years of supervised probation, complete financial restitution including punitive damages, and permanent prohibition from any involvement in financial services or business consulting. The man who had planned to steal my business was now prohibited by federal law from managing anyone else's finances. His professional destruction had been equally comprehensive. Mackenzie and Associates had not only terminated his partnership but successfully sued him for damages related to reputational harm and client relationship disruption. Richard Thornton and Associates had permanently lost their practicing licenses and faced ongoing civil litigation from multiple former clients who had discovered similar patterns of unethical conduct. The entire network of professionals who had participated in Trevor's conspiracy had been systematically dismantled by regulatory agencies and professional organizations. The most revealing aspect of Trevor's downfall had been how quickly his support system abandoned him once his criminal behavior became public. Former colleagues who had praised his strategic thinking suddenly distanced themselves from association with fraud convictions. Professional organizations removed him from membership roles. Even his family had eventually acknowledged that his actions were indefensible and had ceased contact after learning the full scope of his deception and manipulation. But the personal transformation had been even more profound than the business success. The woman who discovered her husband's betrayal while planning their anniversary celebration had evolved into someone who understood that strategic thinking and compassionate service weren't contradictory forces. They were complementary strengths that created sustainable success and meaningful protection. Sarah Chen, who now managed our expanded corporate consulting division, had recently shared a perspective that crystallized the broader meaning of our victory. Mrs. Walsh, what you accomplished wasn't just protecting your business, she reflected during our quarterly strategy meeting. You showed that people who try to destroy others through deception and manipulation face real consequences that extend far beyond individual cases. That matters for everyone who builds something meaningful. She was right. The community impact had been equally significant. Harmony Interior's expansion had created over 80 new jobs in skilled design services. Our business protection consulting had helped dozens of entrepreneurs safeguard their companies against similar threats, and our success story had inspired other business owners to implement stronger protective measures before crises occurred. The financial outcomes had exceeded even Victoria Sterling's most optimistic projections. The restitution payments from Trevor, combined with the expanded client contracts and consulting fees, had established a level of financial security that made future attempts at economic manipulation impossible. More importantly, the business structure we had developed was so well protected and thoroughly documented that it would be virtually immune to any future legal challenges. Jennifer Walsh, whose company had been one of our earliest corporate clients and whose relationship Trevor had tried to sabotage, had become both a close friend and a powerful advocate for our approach to business development. Catherine, what impressed me most wasn't just your ability to defend against Trevor's attacks, she reflected during our annual contract review. It was how you transformed that crisis into an opportunity to build something even more meaningful and impactful. That transformation mindset had become central to my personal philosophy and business strategy. Every challenge was approached as an opportunity to demonstrate resilience and strategic thinking. Every setback was analyzed for lessons that could strengthen future operations. Every success was leveraged to create additional value for clients and community members who depended on our services. As I prepared for the evening celebration at our new Maplewood Heights location, surrounded by the team of talented professionals who had helped build this expanded vision, I reflected on the extraordinary journey from potential victimization to comprehensive triumph. Trevor's criminal conspiracy had been designed to steal my business and destroy my professional reputation. Instead, it had forced me to discover capabilities I had never fully appreciated and to build protections that had enabled unprecedented growth. The final irony was that Trevor had actually done me an enormous favor, though certainly not in the way he had intended. His betrayal had eliminated a relationship that was holding me back while teaching me lessons about strategic thinking and self-protection that had made every subsequent success possible. The woman he had planned to surprise and overpower had become someone capable of building design empires, influencing industry standards, and helping other entrepreneurs protect themselves against similar threats. 2 years and 3 months after Daniel's life-changing phone call from the Metropolitan Golf Club, I stood before a packed auditorium at the National Women's Entrepreneurship Summit in San Francisco, preparing to deliver the keynote address that would crystallize everything I had learned about transformation, justice, and the power of strategic thinking when applied to protecting what matters most. The woman who had once been planning, Jennifer Walsh, whose company had been one of our earliest corporate clients and whose relationship Trevor had tried to sabotage, had become both a close friend and a powerful advocate for our approach to business development. Catherine, what impressed me most wasn't just your ability to defend against Trevor's attacks, she reflected during our annual contract review. It was how you transformed that crisis into an opportunity to build something even more meaningful and impactful. That transformation mindset had become central to my personal philosophy and business strategy. Every challenge was approached as an opportunity to demonstrate resilience and strategic thinking. Every setback was analyzed for lessons that could strengthen future operations. Every success was leveraged to create additional value for clients and community members who depended on our services. As I prepared for the evening celebration at our new Metropolitan Heights location, surrounded by the team of talented professionals who had helped build this expanded vision, I reflected on the extraordinary journey from potential victimization to comprehensive triumph. Trevor's criminal conspiracy had been designed to steal my business and destroy my professional reputation. Instead, it had forced me to discover capabilities I had never fully appreciated and to build protections that had enabled unprecedented growth. The final irony was that Trevor had actually done me an enormous favor, though certainly not in the way he had intended. His betrayal had eliminated a relationship that was holding me back while teaching me lessons about strategic thinking and self-protection that had made every subsequent success possible. The woman he had planned to surprise and overpower had become someone capable of building design empires, influencing industry standards, and helping other entrepreneurs protect themselves against similar threats. 2 years and 3 months after Daniel's life-changing phone call from the Metropolitan Golf Club, I stood before a packed auditorium at the National Women's Entrepreneurship Summit in San Francisco, preparing to deliver the keynote address that would crystallize everything I had learned about transformation, justice, and the power of strategic thinking when applied to protecting what matters most. The woman who had once been planning anniversary celebrations while her husband plotted her destruction was now inspiring thousands of business leaders with a story that had become legendary in entrepreneurship circles. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, looking out at the sea of faces that included CEOs, startup founders, and aspiring entrepreneurs from across the globe. 2 years ago, I thought I was married to a supportive partner who believed in my dreams. What I discovered was that I was actually living with someone who was systematically planning to steal everything I had built through 15 years of hard work and genuine service to others. The auditorium fell completely silent as I shared the opening moments of my story. Daniel's warning call, the overheard conversation about divorce timing, and the slow revelation of Trevor's comprehensive criminal conspiracy. But this wasn't just a cautionary tale about betrayal. It was a masterclass in how preparation, strategic thinking, and genuine character could triumph over deception and manipulation. The most important lesson I learned wasn't about divorce, fraud, or even business protection. I continued, my voice carrying the confidence that came from having transformed potential destruction into unprecedented success. It was about recognizing that someone capable of building something meaningful from nothing possesses exactly the skills necessary to defend that achievement against anyone foolish enough to attack it through criminal means. The response was electric. 3 standing ovations interrupted my 45-minute presentation as I detailed how Trevor's months of planning had created the evidence trail for his own prosecution, how his character assassination attempts had strengthened my professional relationships, and how his systematic underestimation of my capabilities had led to his complete destruction, while enabling my transformation into an industry leader. During the question and answer session, a young entrepreneur from Portland asked the question that had become central to my message. Mrs. Walsh, how do you distinguish between healthy caution and paranoid overprotection when building business safeguards? The distinction is simple, I replied, drawing on 2 years of consulting experience with business owners facing similar threats. Healthy protection is about documenting what you build, understanding what you own, and maintaining relationships based on mutual value rather than dependence. Paranoid overprotection is about hiding assets, restricting information, and treating everyone as potential enemies. One approach strengthens your business, the other weakens it. That philosophy had become the foundation of not just my business protection consulting, but my entire approach to professional and personal relationships. The lessons learned from Trevor's betrayal had evolved into a comprehensive framework for building what I called resilient success, achievement that was both protected against internal threats and enhanced by genuine external partnerships. The impact of our story had extended far beyond individual business consulting. Harvard Business School had incorporated our case study into their MBA curriculum. As an example of crisis management and strategic response, the FBI's Financial Crimes Division used Trevor's prosecution as a training example for investigating systematic fraud in domestic relationships. Legal firms across the country maintain libraries of our documentation methods as templates for business protection planning. But perhaps most significantly, the Harmony Interiors Protection Protocol had become an industry standard that was being adopted by design firms, consulting practices, and other service-based businesses throughout North America. What had begun as my desperate attempt to defend against criminal attack had evolved into a systematic approach to business security that was protecting hundreds of other entrepreneurs from similar threats. The personal vindication had been equally profound. 3 months earlier, I had received a formal apology from Metropolitan Design Quarterly, not just for their initial response to Trevor's sabotage, but for their failure to investigate the obviously fabricated concerns before potentially damaging my reputation. Their subsequent 3-part feature series about Harmony Interiors had generated more positive publicity than any paid advertising campaign could have achieved. More meaningful was the restoration of relationships that Trevor had attempted to poison through his manipulation campaign. My mother, sister Emily, and friend Sarah had all expressed deep regret about how easily Trevor had weaponized their genuine concern for me. But their recognition of his manipulation tactics had actually strengthened our bonds and created a support network that was more protective and understanding than ever before. The financial outcomes continued to exceed every projection. Harmony Interiors now employ. Instead, his overconfidence and fundamental misunderstanding of strategic thinking had created the opposite outcome entirely. He was spending his days in federal prison, professionally ruined and personally abandoned by everyone who had once respected him. I was building business empires, protecting other entrepreneurs, and inspiring thousands of people with a story about how justice, properly implemented, could be more powerful than any revenge. The final irony was that Trevor had taught me, albeit unintentionally, the most valuable lesson of my professional life: that genuine strength comes not from the ability to destroy others, but from the capacity to build something so meaningful and well protected that it becomes impossible to steal. The woman he had planned to surprise and defeat had become someone whose success story would inspire others for generations to come. Justice, I had learned, wasn't just about punishment. It was about transformation, and the transformation that Trevor's criminal conspiracy had accidentally triggered had been more profound, more meaningful, and more rewarding than any revenge could possibly have been. Sometimes the greatest victory is not just surviving someone's attempt to destroy you, but using that attack as the foundation for building something even more extraordinary than they could ever have imagined. If this story has inspired you, remember that you possess more strength and capability than anyone who would try to tear you down could ever understand. Your ability to create, to build, and to transform challenges into opportunities will always be more powerful than someone else's attempt to steal or destroy. Never let anyone convince you that your dreams are too small to protect or too large to achieve. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey. Tomorrow, we have another amazing story of triumph over adversity that you won't want to miss. Don't forget to subscribe and let me know in the comments. Have you ever discovered your own hidden strength during a crisis. Your story might inspire someone else who needs to hear it. Coming up next, you'll see two more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.